Call Senator Siewert.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I rise to contribute to this next round of the debate on the government's attempt to get rid of the clean energy package and the wrecking of a package that is a carefully designed package to address, as Christine Milne has said repeatedly and my colleagues have said, the real emergency facing this country, and that is the climate emergency. And I join with my colleagues and want to be able to say to any future grandchildren that I may have that I did my level best during the debates in this chamber to stop the Abbott government putting the wrecking ball through this clean energy package. I'll be able to look them in the eye and say, I recognise this. I've spent most of my life trying to address climate change. Previously, as many people in this chamber know, I used to be the coordinator of the Conservation Council of WA. I can also remember I had some far-sighted teachers, and I also remember my teachers talking to me about what they then called the greenhouse effect. And so I know that what is being done today is wrong, that it will impact on our climate, and that we actually do need to put in place measures that address climate change, and that the package that was put in through the clean energy package does just that, has a number of measures, not just a price on carbon, but another number of other measures that complement that. And since I spoke in this place just last week, two new pieces of information have come out just in the last couple of days about both the impact of climate change, the impact it's having already on Australia and in my home state of Western Australia, and I'll go into that in a minute, but also on Aboriginal and traditional landowners, and I'll go into that in a minute. There was an article in The Guardian that was talking about a paper in Nature on climate change about regional rainfall decline in Australia, which attributing it to greenhouse gas anthropogenic. I have a lot of trouble saying that word. Always have anthropogenic greenhouse gases and ozone levels, and it points out that in Perth and the southwest part of Australia, we are going to have a massive 40% reduction in rainfall, and that is on top of the rainfall decline that we have already had over the last couple of decades. Well-documented decline in rainfall that the West Australian government, various West Australian governments over the last 20 years have been recognising, not strongly enough, but have been recognising in their efforts to address providing, for example, a water resource for Western Australia. But this research points out that Perth has been identified as the most vulnerable city and the prediction is a 40% decrease in rainfall. The rainfall could mean that, and they point out that the West Australian capital, Perth, my home city, will have to rely on alternative sources of water. But the point here with this reduction is that it's not just about having to supply a new further water sources for Perth. It is going to impact further on agriculture, and I say further because, as I've highlighted in this place before, climate change and climate variability is already adversely impacting on our agriculture in Western Australia, and so our farmers in Western Australia are some of the best at adaptation. It's also been recognised. We've had to, because we've been farming sand for the last over 150 years. We've had to be able to adapt, but it's adapting to a 40% decrease in rainfall on top of what we've already adapted to is virtually impossible. And then we look at what impact it's going to have on natural ecosystems. Already we're seeing drying of those ecosystems. It's going to have a devastating impact on what's left of our forests. It's going to have a devastating impact on our biodiversity, bearing in mind that Western Australia is a biodiversity hotspot. It's got plants and animals that are found nowhere else in the world. A biodiversity hotspot means that it's got one of the highest levels of biodiversity on the planet. That is at risk. Wetlands. Western Australia, the Perth metropolitan area, has already lost between 80 and 85% of its wetlands. We are very reliant. Those wetlands are connected to the groundwater systems. You reduce our rainfall by 40%, you're going to have a devastating impact on that environment. This study is it talks about why climate change is impacting on our rainfall in Western Australia, and says also that Perth is particularly vulnerable because most of our rainfall, when we get it, falls between May and September. In other words, it's a winter rainfall pattern, and that's the pattern that's going to be affected. I'm not going to go into all the technical details that the paper goes into, but the paper does go into technical details about why climate change is going to hit so extensively on southern Australia, but in particularly southwest Australia and Perth. But points have been made, and I touched on them just then, is that the rainfall flow in Perth reservoirs has already reduced by 75% over the last 50 years. And I make this point because with the dropping in rainfall of 40%, you actually decrease the runoff by a much more significantly higher percentage. So, for example, with the rainfall that's been dropping, the rainfall decline could sometimes then, if you extrapolate that into runoff decline, sometimes you have to 1/3 drop in rainfall multiplies out to a 2/3 drop, a decline in the runoff. So you think a 40% decline in rainfall is bad enough. When you start actually looking at what impact that is going to have on our dams, it's going to have a devastating impact. Also, points have been made about the impact of the impact of climate change and reduced rainfall on our beautiful wine-making area of Margaret River. In the Greens, we have a bit of competition actually about who's got the best wine-growing areas in Australia and their state, and we in Western Australia actually think it happens to be Western Australia. But whoever happens to win that title, the fact is that the declining rainfall is going to have a significant impact on the beautiful wine-growing wine-growing area of Margaret River. That is, as I said when I started my contribution, that this study has only just come out, and it's further evidence of the impact of climate change. And unfortunately, when I sat here listening to the contributions from the government to the debate, the last debate on these bills, on this package of bills, it was absolutely clear from the contribution from government senators is that although they say they acknowledge climate change, what they actually don't acknowledge is that climate change is being changed by human activity. So effectively they deny climate change. And I urge people to go back and look at those contributions, because there's no doubt, nobody listening to those contributions can be in any doubt that they actually do deny the impact of human activity on the climate. Another important point that came out at the end of last week was concerns that traditional owners have made public now about their impact of getting rid of a price on carbon on their abatement activities. The Kimberley Land Council expressed concern last week that carbon projects worth millions of dollars to their communities will be lost as a result of the abolition of the Clean Energy Package and the impact that will have on the price of carbon. They said that carbon projects registered by Aboriginal organisations on native title lands in the state's Kimberley, in my home state of Western Australia, have generated carbon credits through fire management practices, and they are concerned that 230,000 credits generated so far at a value of $5 million will be dramatically reduced causing a massive loss to remote communities. The KLC said, when you look at the size or the scale of the activity in the area, you're taking millions of dollars and lots of opportunities for income to be generated to provide a number of outcomes, particularly around employment and jobs and training and business opportunities. All the investment of time, people's energy, developing capacity, people that are getting geared up to try and do something with their lives. The rug is being pulled out from under them is an understatement. This is again from the Kimberley Land Council, and to be very upfront, I haven't always seen eye to eye with the Kimberley Land Council on some other proposals, but we do work a lot. I do talk to them a lot about land management practices, the excellent work they do on land management practices and Indigenous protected areas and Indigenous rangers programs. We've worked very closely with them, and I absolutely take their point here. This will significantly impact on their opportunity to build development opportunities in the Kimberley from land management practices. In their understanding of the country, I've spent time up there, I've spent time with the rangers, I know of the work that they are doing, and it's excellent land management work, and here is an opportunity that they are going to lose when the government is joined by some of the crossbenchers and the Palmer party to vote down this package. So not only are they denying the impact of climate change, are they getting rid of this excellent package and of a pricing mechanism, they are also impacting on the opportunity for traditional owners to earn millions of dollars from their land management packages. And I don't think I can let this opportunity go also without mentioning, and Senator Millward mentioned this yesterday, the West Australians' comment yesterday in the editorial. It's not often that I quote the West in this place, but on this occasion I need to. I won't quote the whole thing, but the editorial from yesterday says, barring more Clive Palmer antics, the federal government will sometime this week axe the carbon tax. There will be cheers and celebrations amongst government MPs, and we've heard about that tonight, and in some of the nation's boardrooms. But for anyone who cares about good economic policy, who thinks closely about Australia's economic future, and who acknowledge climate change is real, well, it's time for tears. There's no other way to say it. The decision to get rid of a price on carbon is one of the poorest and most short-sighted economic policies inflicted on this country. And they it then goes on. Shane Wright then goes on to talk about some of the impacts of some of the finer points. My point here is that this is economic vandalism. It is taking billions and billions of dollars out of our economy. And again, Prime Minister said to the crossbench, identify alternative sources of revenue. Well, there's billions of dollars, plus you're helping generate a cleaner future for our children, for our grandchildren, and for the biodiversity of this planet, and for traditional owners in Australia, providing leadership around the world. But now we go to the bottom. We're the back of the class. As the world is now starting to see that we need to be taking urgent action on climate change, we're going out the back door, pedalling backwards to rewind what is recognised globally as leading the debate and leading the measures on climate change. Our children and our grandchildren will look back at this time and say, what were you doing? And I'm glad that I can tell them that we did everything we could, and we will continue to campaign. And believe me, in the not-too-distant future, Australians will be saying to you, what did you do? You lied to us. Why didn't you not understand? Why don't you get it? Why didn't you get it then? You've set us so far behind. But we will ensure that we have effective action on climate change. This is a road bump to change, because the planet and Australians and people around the world know that this is urgent. How many more articles and research do you need to realise that if you don't take action now, you are condemning the planet? You are condemning the future of the peoples of this planet, the biodiversity of this planet. And we on this side will not stop until we make sure we have effective action. We'll be voting no to this repeal, and we'll then be campaigning as hard as we can to make sure that we have effective action on climate change that includes a price on carbon. I swear to you, that's what we'll be doing.